My name is John Pasfield, and the title of this reading will be John and Santa, the Cowboy Shirt, Video 17, The Planning Notebook. Well, here's the novella, John and Santa, the Cowboy Shirt, but I'm not reading from the book itself. I'm going to read 5 passages from the earliest notes that I made for this novella as I move from vagueness and possibilities to sureness and certainties in the planning and writing of the story. So here's number 1. It's the very first thing I wrote. Just a heading, a Santa fantasy, and then a sentence. This just came to me as my wife and I were having supper. And then just some points with dashes. Dash, a novella. Dash, Santa. Dash, a fantasy. Dash, Santa's not old. In brackets, he's timeless. But he's tired. Dash, he finds that the elves and the reindeer lack enthusiasm. So that was really the first note. So some of those things made it in. It's a novella, it's about Santa, it's a fantasy. But that he's old and tired and the elves and reindeer lack enthusiasm didn't make it in, right? So that's how these notes evolve. Here's a second note. In this case, some dialogue between two people. Let me get my page flipped here. So just some dialogue. Look, Santa, I have an idea. That sleigh of yours is invisible? And then Santa replies to John, yes and no. I can turn it off and on. I can let people see me if I want. Or I can do my rounds without being seen. And then John, I have an idea. This is early December. Can you make me invisible as well? Santa then replies, within the aura of the sleigh, you can't be seen. And then John, well, I have a suggestion for you. Why not take a break for a day? We'll need the sleigh and the reindeer. Hopefully Rudolph will come along. I'll show you what goes on out there in the world. So it almost sounded like John was going to be the person who does the showing of the scenes and the explaining. But that didn't quite go. Okay, here's a third one. Just a heading, Santa, and then some dashes, some points. Workshop, dull. Bothered by something wrong in the world. A present undelivered, question mark. What else could it be, question mark. Then a line by Santa. For the life of me, I don't know what it is. So the idea that Santa's upset by something, bothered by something, did make it. But not because it was an undelivered present. So that's the third one. Okay. Here's a fourth one. The word chapter, and then Christmas 1949. And then in square brackets later, I corrected this. I put, actually, I was 4 in 1949 and 9 in 1954. So I was kind of working on the idea, which turned out to be the cover photo, that I was 7, 8, or 9 in the era that I was thinking of as my earliest Christmases. Just some dashes and some points. Mom, my mother. Troubled look, some indecipherable words, which I never was able to figure out. Opening presents, Grandpa and Uncle Claude, etc. Feasts, and then the word mom, highest up, that seems to refer to a cupboard. Closet, searching, shirt. So searching for this missing shirt. So that started to emerge. And then here's something that didn't make it in. I look down, and I'm wearing my cowboy shirt. I'm 9 years old and I'm wearing my cowboy shirt. So that's what I thought might make it into the novella. But I don't become 9 years old in the novella, and I don't end up wearing that cowboy shirt that was missing when I was 7, 8, or 9. Okay, here's a fifth one. A tentative title, John and Santa. Each of us has 2 creators. Well, I don't know whether that would be considered one of the great titles like War and Peace or something. Each of us has 2 creators, but the cowboy shirt became the subtitle for John and Santa later. But you try out titles and see what, not only what is a good title, but what gives you the idea of the novel or novella. Okay, dash writer, dash working on polishing a novella. So that made it in. And here's some words that might be part of the novel when it's written. Suddenly, I wake up and I'm sitting in a sleigh. Ahead of me are reindeer who are flying through the sky. Beside me, holding the reins, is this large, white-bearded fellow dressed in red. In a flash, I knew it must be St. Nick. That's kind of borrowing from the poem. there's a few questions that I've been meaning to ask you. I might want to write a book about you someday. And then what just flashed into my mind is that me would ask Santa questions. So that's where I got that idea about what he is, how he fits into the world that God has created. Is he real? Does he know God personally? Was he created when the world was created? So these kind of made it into the novella of John asking Santa questions. His answer or answers is or are. I'll flip the page here. So Santa answering makes it in. He's a fictional character, but he's nonetheless real for that. He only knows what he knows. He doesn't know God personally. He has certain power and yet is limited in what he can do. He can't stop wars or heal broken hearts or feed the hungry. He can deliver toys, and this is what people don't seem to know. In Santa's voice, I can suggest that people give gifts to others as well. So starting to get the voice of Santa, but also the idea that John asks Santa questions because he's mythical. He's not a human character, and Santa answers, but maybe doesn't tell everything. Okay, so there's 5 sections from the planning notebook, and it goes on like that until the whole idea of the novella becomes clear. So here's a conclusion, or rather a note that I wrote as I was looking over this material. It's interesting on looking back at these planning notes that some ideas are included intact in the final version of a story, some are modified to suit later ideas, and some are rejected completely. A planning notebook is simply that, a notebook in which one makes plans for the writing of a novel or novella. Oftentimes in the early stages, my notes are written in point form, as I only have a word or two to write about each aspect of the potential novel or novella. A good sign is that I might hear the voice of the main character, by which I mean I'm able to write the words that I expect will be printed when the novel or novella is published. However, as I learned from reading the workbooks of Henry James, it's best to plan the novel as thoroughly as possible before moving into the stage at which one is both planning and writing the novel. The reason for doing this is to avoid having to rewrite the novel or novella at any stage in its development. To me, the worst thing I could do is rewrite. To have the actual words of a novel is wonderful, and one can go back and lift them out of the planning notebook and polish them when one knows where they'll go in the novel structure, but they are best left in the planning notebook while new ideas about the entire novel or novella are added. I only start the stage, which I would call the writing of the novel, when I have a complete idea, a plan, which tells me where all of the major elements of the novel or novella will go, not only in which chapter an element will go, but in which image unit of a particular chapter an element will go. So any of those words that did make it into the novella, I wanted to wait to see would they go in chapter 1 or chapter 7 of, and at that time I didn't even know of how many chapters, but I finally decided on 10 chapters. On the other hand, it's possible to plan too much, or at least for too long. Before I became a writer, I was a great reader of literature, of criticism, and of biography, and one item about writing that has stuck with me is a comment by a critic that F. Scott Fitzgerald, spent so long planning his novel, Tender is the Night, that the final version of that novel has 3 or 4 potential novels crowded between the covers of the book. The author had ideas for what could have been 3 or 4 novels if he had written each within a year or 2 of his original idea. But as he worked on the novel during a time period when he was getting new ideas for new novels, he was constantly rewriting the novel rather than writing it. By this, I mean that he was putting elements in the novel that if he had looked back over his notebook, he might have realized were very much Scott Fitzgerald ideas, Scott Fitzgerald concepts, but that each would have made a separate book a separate creation, which T.S. Eliot called an objective correlative, an idea pattern in the mind of the author, F. Scott Fitzgerald, rather than all being crammed into one novel. So, with these two ideas in mind, to not start too early and to not start too late in the writing of a novel, I can only add that the sense of timing has to be intuitive. One simply has a sense that it is time not to stop note-making, but to combine the note-making and the writing so the two flow together until a rough draft is completed. So, this is my novella, John and Santa, the Cowboy Shirt. It's available on Amazon. It's also available on my publisher's website, roxmillspress.com, and the notebook, Planning John and Santa, is available for free on my website, johnpassfield.ca. So thank you for watching this video.